The moment my mother-in-law leaned forward with that predatory smile and said, "Charlotte, darling, it's time we discussed your financial responsibilities to this family," I knew my life was about to change forever. But I had no idea just how deep their betrayal ran, or how satisfying my revenge would become. If stories like this resonate with you, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss our latest uploads. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. My name is Charlotte, and for 7 years, I believed I had married into a loving family. I was spectacularly, catastrophically wrong. When I first met David at a medical conference in Boston, I thought it was fate, a charming marketing executive who seemed genuinely interested in my work as a cardiac surgeon, asking thoughtful questions about my cases and celebrating my achievements with authentic pride. He was everything I thought I wanted, supportive, family-oriented, and completely unfazed by my demanding career. What I didn't know was that David had done his homework before we even met. While I saw a chance encounter at the coffee stand, he saw a carefully orchestrated opportunity. A mutual friend later told me that David had specifically asked to be introduced to that heart surgeon with the corner office. He knew exactly who I was, what I earned, and what I represented. Financial security for life. The courtship was textbook perfect. David showed up at the hospital with flowers after particularly difficult surgeries. He never complained about my long hours or emergency calls. When I had to cancel dates for trauma cases, he would simply say, "That's what makes you amazing, Charlotte. You save lives." I fell completely for his act. David worked for a mid-tier marketing company, earning a respectable but modest salary. This never bothered me. I had been raised to believe that love transcended financial differences. When he proposed after 2 years of dating, with a ring that I later learned cost more than 3 months of his salary, I said yes without hesitation. "I want to spend my life supporting your dreams," he said as he slipped the ring onto my finger. I thought he meant my medical career. I had no idea he meant my bank account. Meeting his family felt like finding the missing piece of my life. Margaret and Robert seemed genuinely warm, insisting I call them Mom and Dad from our first dinner together. Jessica, his sister, welcomed me with enthusiasm, and even Marcus, the chronically unemployed younger brother, seemed charming in his bohemian artistic way. "We're so lucky David found you," Margaret gushed at our engagement party. "You're exactly what this family needed." I thought she meant emotionally. She meant financially. The wedding was beautiful, a lavish affair that I funded, entirely while David's family took credit for the planning. Every vendor somehow had my credit card information. Every upgrade was approved in my name. When I questioned the mounting costs, Margaret would pat my hand and say, "Don't worry about money, darling. This is an investment in your future happiness." She was right, just not in the way I thought. The financial manipulation started almost immediately after the honeymoon, but it was so gradual, so expertly crafted, that I didn't recognize it as exploitation. First came the house. We found a beautiful colonial in an upscale neighborhood that I fell in love with. David insisted we put both our names on the deed because we're a team now, even though my down payment covered the entire purchase and my salary would carry the mortgage. "What's mine is yours, and what's yours is mine," he said, kissing me as we signed the papers. Then Jessica needed a place to stay temporarily after a bad breakup. The basement apartment was supposed to be a short-term arrangement, but weeks turned into months, and months turned into years. Her rent payments were sporadic at best, usually accompanied by elaborate explanations about client payments being delayed or unexpected expenses. Marcus was next, the struggling musician who couldn't seem to hold a regular job but had no shortage of opportunities that required financial backing. A recording session here, a new guitar there, studio time that would finally break him into the industry. Each request came with David's puppy dog eyes and gentle manipulation. "He's family, Charlotte. We help family." When I suggested Marcus get a regular job to supplement his music income, David became defensive. "Not everyone is lucky enough to have a guaranteed 6-figure salary, Charlotte. Some people have to take risks to follow their dreams." Robert's medical bills started after a minor heart attack that could have been treated with basic insurance coverage. But somehow extra tests were needed, specialists required, treatments that weren't quite covered. Each bill that arrived seemed reasonable enough individually, but they added up to thousands. Margaret developed a mysterious chronic condition that required expensive medications and regular treatments. When I suggested she seek a second opinion or look into more cost-effective alternatives, the family closed ranks. "How can you put a price on Mom's health?" Jessica asked, her voice dripping with manufactured hurt. The requests always came with emotional manipulation disguised as family bonding. Sunday dinners, where they would regale me with stories of how previous generations had supported each other through hard times. How real. Families shared everything, sacrificed for each other, put collective welfare above individual concerns. "You're the angel we never knew we needed," Margaret would say, tears glistening in her practiced eyes. "We're so blessed that David found someone who understands what family really means. I was so busy being the perfect daughter-in-law, so desperate to belong to their warm family unit, that I failed to notice how one-sided the support always flowed. My money solved their problems, but when I mentioned stress from work or financial concerns about our mounting household expenses, the conversation would quickly shift to someone else's more pressing needs. David's paycheck seemed to evaporate before it hit our joint account. When I asked about it, he became evasive and defensive. "I have responsibilities to my family, Charlotte. I thought you understood that when you married me." "I do understand, but we need to discuss these things. We're supposed to be partners. Are you saying you don't trust me? After everything we've built together?" The gaslighting was so subtle, so expertly crafted, that I began to question my own instincts. Was I being unreasonable? Was I too controlling about money? These doubts were carefully cultivated, I would later realize, like a gardener tending to poisonous flowers. Over 7 years, I calculated that I had contributed over $400,000 to David's family in various forms. Mortgage payments, car repairs, medical bills, business investments, emergency loans that were never repaid. David's total contribution to our household expenses was less than $60,000. I was quite literally their cash cow, and they were about to try to make it official. The breaking point came on a frigid February evening when David arrived home with an announcement that made my surgical instincts scream danger. "Charlotte, we need to talk. The family wants to have a meeting this weekend. It's important." "What kind of meeting?" "It's about our financial arrangement. Mom and Dad think it's time we formalized how we handle money as a family. You know, make sure everyone's responsibilities are clear." The phrasing sent ice through my veins. Our financial arrangement, formalize responsibilities. After 7 years of one-sided financial support, they wanted to make their exploitation official. Saturday arrived with the weight of an execution. I walked into Margaret and Robert's dining room to find the entire family assembled like a tribunal. David, his parents, Jessica, Marcus, and even David's Aunt Eleanor, who I had met exactly twice in 7 years. The dining table was set like a boardroom. Legal pads, calculators, printed spreadsheets, and a laptop displaying what looked like a budget analysis. At the center sat a manila folder that seemed to pulse with malevolent energy. "Charlotte, darling, please sit," Margaret said, her voice honey-sweet, but her eyes sharp as surgical steel. "We have something important to discuss with you." Robert cleared his throat and opened the folder. "Charlotte, we've been doing some financial planning for the family's future, and we've come to some important conclusions." "What kind of conclusions?" David reached across the table and took my hand, his palm damp with nervous sweat. "Charlotte, you know how much this family means to me, to us. We've been talking about how to make sure everyone is properly taken care of." Margaret smiled that predatory smile. "Darling, you've been so generous over the years, so supportive of everyone's needs, but we think it's time to make things more organized." Jessica leaned forward eagerly. "We've calculated what each person should contribute to the family based on their income and ability to pay." Marcus nodded enthusiastically. "It's only fair that everyone contributes proportionally to their earnings." Robert pulled out a spreadsheet and turned it towards me. "Based on Our analysis, we believe you should contribute 50% of your gross monthly salary to the family fund. The words hit me like a physical blow. 50%, half of everything I earned through years of medical school, residency, fellowship, and building my practice. This fund would be managed by Mom and Dad. David continued as if he were discussing vacation plans. They have the most experience with family finances and would make sure the money is distributed where it's needed most. Everyone would contribute according to their ability, Eleanor added helpfully. David would contribute 15%, Jessica 10%, Marcus 5% when he's working. I stared at the spreadsheet, my surgical training allowing me to process the information with clinical detachment. Even as rage built in my chest, they had calculated my earning potential, projected my salary growth, and designed a system to extract maximum financial benefit while contributing the absolute minimum themselves. What if I refuse? I asked quietly. The room fell silent. Margaret's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something cold and calculating. Well, darling, that would be very disappointing. We've always been such a close family, and you've been such an important part of that. It would be tragic if financial disagreements caused distance. David squeezed my hand tighter. Charlotte, we've all agreed this is the right thing to do. It's about family loyalty, about making sure everyone is taken care of. The threat was clear. Comply with their demands or face ostracism from the family I had spent 7 years supporting and believing in. I need time to think about this, I said finally. Of course, Robert said magnanimously. Take the weekend. We'll finalize everything Monday evening. As I drove home in stunned silence, one thought kept echoing in my mind. They had planned this, calculated it. They saw me not as a family member, but as a resource to be harvested. They were about to learn what a terrible mistake they had made. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, while David slept peacefully beside me, snoring softly, as if he hadn't just participated in an attempted financial coup. My mind raced through the implications of what had happened. But more than that, I began to see patterns I had been too trusting to notice before. The emergency requests that always came at moments when I was emotionally vulnerable. The way conversations about my own financial stress were always redirected to someone else's more pressing needs. How David's family treated me with extra warmth right before making major financial requests. Most damning of all, I realized that David had never once defended me or my financial boundaries. Every request from his family was presented as a fait accompli, with my compliance assumed rather than requested. Sunday morning, I told David I needed space to think and drove to my downtown office. As a cardiac surgeon, I was accustomed to making life and death decisions under pressure. But this situation required a different kind of surgical precision, the kind that cuts away diseased tissue to save the healthy organism. I spent the next 12 hours making phone calls and assembling what would become the most satisfying revenge of my life. First, I called my attorney, Patricia Donovan, a brilliant woman who specialized in family law and had a reputation for being absolutely ruthless when her clients were wronged. Patricia, I need you to prepare divorce papers immediately. I also need you to research the legal implications of financial coercion within marriage and the concept of fraud in the inducement of marriage. Charlotte, what's happened? I explained the situation in clinical detail, watching Patricia's expression grow, darker with each revelation. This is financial abuse, Charlotte. What they're attempting is unconscionable, and if your suspicions about the marriage being fraudulent are correct, you may have grounds for additional legal action. How do you want to handle this? I want to give them exactly what they deserve, but I need evidence first. Next, I called my financial advisor, Thomas Chen, who had helped me build substantial wealth through careful investments. Thomas, I need you to move all of my assets into accounts that David cannot access. I also need comprehensive documentation of every penny I've contributed to this family over the past 7 years. Are you sure about this, Charlotte? These kinds of moves can be difficult to reverse. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. The numbers Thomas compiled were staggering. Over 7 years, I had contributed over $400,000 to David's family, while David had contributed less than $60,000 to our household expenses. My most important call was to Rebecca Stone, a private investigator who specialized in matrimonial cases. Rebecca, I need you to dig deep into my husband and his family. I want to know everything: financial records, employment history, criminal background, personal communications, everything. How deep do you want me to go? All the way to bedrock. I have a feeling I'm going to find some very interesting information. The results of Rebecca's investigation arrived Monday afternoon, and they were even more devastating than I had imagined. The crown jewel was a series of text messages and emails dating back to before David and I had even met. Messages between David and Marcus discussing Operation Heart Surgeon, their code name for targeting me specifically. David had researched my background, my salary, my career trajectory, and my personal vulnerabilities before ever approaching me at that conference. One email from David to Jessica was particularly illuminating. Found the perfect mark. Cardiac surgeon, 6-figure salary, no family money guilt. She's desperate to belong somewhere. This is going to be easier than we thought. Marcus had responded, "How much do you think we can get out of her?" David's reply, "If I play this right, everything. She's the golden goose we've been waiting for." There were photos of David and his family celebrating after our engagement, toasting with champagne, paid for with my credit card. Margaret raising her glass and saying, "To David, for landing our retirement plan." The investigation revealed that Marcus had been arrested multiple times for petty theft, charges that had been quietly dropped after family intervention, which meant I had unknowingly funded his legal fees. Jessica's online boutique was actually a front for selling counterfeit designer goods. Robert had been embezzling from his employer, using family emergencies as cover for his theft. But the most damning evidence was David's affair with his colleague Sarah, complete with text messages discussing their plans to milk Charlotte for everything she's worth, before divorcing me and starting their real life together. One text from David to Sarah was particularly brutal. "Don't worry, Charlotte is so desperate to keep this family together that she'll agree to anything. Once we get control of her money through this family contribution plan, I can divorce her and we'll have enough to start over somewhere nice." By Monday evening, I was ready for war. I arrived at Margaret and Robert's house Monday evening with a briefcase, a calm smile, and the quiet confidence of someone holding all the cards. The family was assembled exactly as they had been Saturday, their faces bright with anticipation. "Charlotte, darling," Margaret cooed, "we're so glad you've had time to consider our proposal. Are you ready to move forward with the family financial plan?" "I am," I said, setting my briefcase on the table. "But first, I have some information to share with all of you." David shifted uncomfortably. "Charlotte, we've already discussed the terms. We've discussed your proposal," I interrupted smoothly. "Now it's time to discuss some other things, like the truth." I opened my briefcase and removed several manila folders, arranging them on the table with surgical precision. "Let's start with you, Marcus," I said, sliding a folder across the table. "I discovered some fascinating information about your various entrepreneurial activities." Marcus opened the folder to find photographs of him with known drug dealers, copies of his arrest records, and evidence of his involvement in several theft rings. Interesting hobbies for someone asking for investment. "In their music career," I continued conversationally. Marcus went pale, his hands trembling as he flipped through the documentation. "Jessica, I have something for you as well." I slid another folder across the table. "Your online boutique business model is quite creative. Selling counterfeit designer goods is a federal crime, punishable by up to 10 years in prison." Jessica opened her folder to find evidence of her illegal business activities, including communications with suppliers and customer complaints about fake merchandise. "Robert," I continued, my voice never losing its professional calm, "your embezzlement scheme is particularly bold. Your employer might be very interested in this information." Robert's folder contained evidence of his systematic theft, including forged documents and security footage. The room had gone deadly quiet. Margaret reached for Robert's folder with shaking hands, her face draining of color. "And Margaret," I said, saving the best for last. Your welfare fraud scheme shows real commitment to criminal enterprise. Margaret's folder contained evidence of her fraudulent disability claims for a non-existent dependent. Now, I said, folding my hands on the table, let's discuss David. David looked like he was about to be sick. I slid his folder across the table with particular satisfaction. David, your folder contains some very interesting communications about something called Operation Heart Surgeon. David opened the folder with trembling hands, his face turning various shades of green as he saw the evidence of his long-term deception laid out in devastating detail. This email was particularly enlightening, I continued, pulling out a printed page. You wrote to Marcus, found the perfect mark. Cardiac surgeon, 6-figure salary, no family money guilt. She's desperate to belong somewhere. This is going to be easier than we thought. The silence in the room was deafening. 5 people who had entered this meeting as predators now sat like cornered animals. You see, I continued, standing up slowly, I know exactly what this family meeting was about. It wasn't about fair financial contribution. It was about formalizing 7 years of systematic exploitation. It was about turning me into your official cash cow. Margaret found her voice first, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. Charlotte, you're taking this all wrong. We're family. Family? I repeated, my voice cutting through the air like a scalpel. You researched my income before we even met. You planned our entire relationship around accessing my money. You've spent 7 years treating me like a walking ATM, and now you want to make it official. David finally spoke, his voice cracking with desperation. Charlotte, please. Yes, we made mistakes, but we can work this out. I love you. You love my bank account, I said coldly. Your text messages to Sarah make that very clear, especially the one where you discuss divorcing me once you get control of my money through this family contribution plan. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out one final document, the divorce papers Patricia had prepared. David, I'm filing for divorce tomorrow morning. You have 72 hours to remove your belongings from my house. Any attempt to contact me outside of our attorneys will result in a restraining order. I looked around the table at these people who had conspired to exploit me, who had treated my love and generosity as weaknesses to be manipulated. As for the rest of you, I continued, you have 2 choices. You can quietly disappear from my life and hope I don't decide to share this information with the appropriate authorities. Or you can continue to harass me and discover exactly how vindictive a cardiac surgeon can be when her patience is exhausted. I packed my briefcase with a sharp snap that echoed through the silent room. Oh, and one more thing, I said, pausing at the door. The family meeting you requested? Consider it adjourned, permanently. The aftermath was even more satisfying than I had imagined. Within a week, David had moved out of the house, his belongings packed hastily into garbage bags, with the same care he had shown our marriage. The divorce proceedings were swift and decisive. Patricia had crafted an agreement so ironclad that David's attorney advised him to sign without contest rather than face public exposure of his fraud and infidelity. David's attempt to claim half the house was laughable given the evidence of his systematic deception. Not only did he get nothing, but Patricia successfully argued that he owed me restitution for the fraudulent basis of our marriage. But the most delicious revenge was watching their family unit completely implode without my financial support. Margaret and Robert, faced with the loss of their primary income source and the threat of criminal exposure, turned on each other with vicious recrimination. Jessica and Marcus blamed their parents for involving them in the conspiracy, while the parents blamed the children for being too greedy. Marcus, realizing his drug activities were documented, fled the state. Jessica closed her counterfeit business and took a job at a legitimate retail store, her entrepreneurial dreams permanently grounded. Robert was quietly terminated from his position after I forwarded evidence of his embezzlement to his employer. David, now living in a studio apartment and facing substantial alimony payments, found that Sarah's interest in him evaporated along with his access to my money. She dumped him within a month of our separation, leaving him alone with the consequences of his choices. 3 months after the family meeting, I received an unexpected visitor. Margaret appeared at my office looking haggard and desperate. "Dr. Henderson," she said, "I need to talk to you about David." I invited her into my office, curious about what this conversation might reveal. He's not doing well," she said, tears streaming down her face. "None of us are. Without your support, everything has fallen apart." "What did you expect, Margaret? You built your entire family's financial structure around exploiting my generosity. When that ended, of course, everything collapsed. We know we made mistakes, but surely there's some way." "There's no way," I interrupted. "You didn't make mistakes. You planned a 7-year fraud. You researched me like a business acquisition, manipulated my emotions, and treated my love like a commodity to be harvested." Margaret left my office that day looking broken, and I felt something I hadn't expected. Relief. Not satisfaction, not vindictiveness, but the clean, clear relief of finally being free from people who had never valued me as anything more than a source of income. 1 year after that infamous family meeting, I stood in the kitchen of my beautiful colonial house, now truly mine in every sense, preparing dinner for my actual friends. These were people who valued me for my character, my intelligence, my humor, and my company. People who had supported me through my divorce with genuine love and concern, asking for nothing in return. The house felt completely different now. I had redecorated entirely, erasing every trace of the life I had shared with David and his parasitic family. The oppressive weight of constant financial obligation had been lifted, replaced by the clean air of independence and authentic relationships. My career had flourished in ways I hadn't expected. Without the constant drain of supporting an extended family of grifters, I had been able to invest in advanced surgical training and had recently been promoted to chief of cardiac surgery. The irony wasn't lost on me. By trying to control my money, David's family had ultimately freed me to achieve even greater success. I had also started a foundation to help people escape financially abusive relationships, providing legal assistance and financial counseling to those who found themselves trapped by partners or families who viewed them as walking ATMs. The foundation was funded entirely by the money I would have otherwise wasted on David's family's manufactured emergencies. Sometimes, late at night, I would think about that family meeting and marvel at their audacity. They had believed they could manipulate a successful surgeon, a woman trained to make life and death decisions under pressure, into becoming their permanent source of income. Their fundamental mistake had been confusing kindness with weakness, generosity with gullibility. They had mistaken my love for David with financial desperation, my desire for family connection with a willingness to be exploited indefinitely. They had wanted to formalize their exploitation of me, to make their parasitism official and permanent. Instead, they had given me the clarity I needed to see our relationship for what it truly was, a long-term financial fraud disguised as love. The family meeting had accomplished exactly what they intended. It had clarified financial responsibilities and established clear consequences for exploitation. The only difference was that I, not they, had defined the terms. In the end, they had taught me the most valuable lesson of my life, that real love doesn't come with a price tag, and real family doesn't require payment for affection. They had tried to turn me into their cash cow, but instead, they had set me free. As I often tell the women who come to my foundation, the best revenge isn't cruelty or spite. The best revenge is refusing to be a victim and choosing instead to build a life so good that your exploiters' opinions become irrelevant. They had demanded half my salary at a family meeting. I had given them something much more valuable, a comprehensive education in the consequences of greed, betrayal, and the fatal mistake of underestimating a woman who had spent her career saving lives by cutting away diseased tissue. The surgery had been a complete success. The patient, my life, had made a full recovery, and the diseased tissue had been permanently removed, never to threaten my well-being again. Sometimes the most profound revenge is simply refusing to be exploited and choosing instead to be victorious.